Good evening. Welcome to the lecture, Reading and Writing with Young Children with ASD. In this lecture, we're going to discuss how reading and writing skills are learned. We're going to discuss the importance of reading and writing with all children of all ages, and we're going to talk about very specific strategies that you can implement to support the child, again, of any age with ASD, so that literacy learning is really optimized. And when we talk about using strategies, it's also important to talk about how to choose the right books, the right reading material, as well as the right writing material and activities for our kids. This is a model of how emergent literacy develops. We used to believe that literacy skills developed in a more sequential way, that first children, young babies, would learn how to listen, and then they would learn how to speak, and then they would be ready to read, and then they could be ready to write. However, more recent research shows us that reading and writing skills develop alongside listening and speaking. All of these areas of development develop simultaneously. We cannot learn how to listen without learning how to speak, and we can't learn how to speak without reading, and we can't learn how to write without reading. Children need all of these things to be going on. They need to be experiencing all of these skills and activities and this part of development simultaneously so that they can be interactive and feed upon each other. So no more do we believe that reading and writing skills, literacy skills are developed in a way that requires prerequisite skills to develop first. We believe that all areas, speaking, listening, writing, reading, develop together. There are no rest stops in literacy skill development. It's a continuous, messy, connected process. So it's not, again, as easy as saying first one learns how to listen, then they can speak, then they can read, and then they will be ready to write. We know that it's a little more messy, continuous than that. There are benefits of reading with children of all ages. First of all, when we read with young children, they listen to the sound of language, which is very important for the development of literacy skills. Children also learn by being exposed to books and reading with children. They learn the pleasure of sharing books with another person. Literacy development occurs in a social context. It doesn't occur in isolation. And so when we read with children, they learn how to enjoy books with other people. Children also learn new words when exposed to literacy activities and reading and writing. The child has opportunities to establish comprehension skills. The child can explore words that he or she already knows, but in a new context. And that's very important because generalization can then be promoted where the child can demonstrate the comprehension of a word in one context, in one book, and they can explore what it means in a different context and perhaps a different book. The skill of generalization is very important. Books, reading, writing allow our children to explore imagination. Reading with our children offers our kids opportunities to discover new ways to communicate through print, through text. Also, our child is exposed to literacy development skills when we read to our children. And that exposure helps to build that foundation upon which all later skills will develop. Reading with our kids also teaches our children how to learn, and that's really important. I also included that little box about joint engagement. Like I said before, literacy skills develop in a social context. And when we share experiences with others while reading, joint engagement can be developed. And for our population, that offers some really, really nice opportunities. Let's talk about the benefits of writing with children of all ages. Well, writing is very important in order for our children to be independent. One day, we want our young children, when they grow up, to be able to pay bills, to create shopping lists, to send out emails to make a request, to write a check. We also want our children to be students. Our children need to be able to write in order to demonstrate their learning and in order to extend their learning. Writing also helps our children to one day establish careers. Any career involves writing. Now, writing can also be typing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to handwrite, but in some capacity, every career does require writing. Writing also allows our children to participate in the digital age that we live in. Electronic communication is extremely prevalent. Social networking, social media, this is the future. And we want our children to one day be able to compete in that type of environment. Writing also allows our children to use language in different ways. They read language and they also write language. Writing also allows our children to establish this sense of power that they can communicate through a written message. Being able to write gives our children skills that they can take with them for the rest of their lives. Writing allows our children to be able to express things that they need, their thoughts, their ideas, their comments. And that power can never be taken away from them once they're given that skill. What specific reading and writing concepts do we want a young child to learn? So as we're talking about teaching our children reading and writing skills, we need to kind of be aware of what those beginning skills look like. We want our young readers to learn how to hold the book the right way. We take that skill for granted, but it is a concept of print that we must directly teach our children who have some challenges, who these children may not have been exposed to as many reading and writing activities as typical children. And so it's important for us to perhaps directly teach some of these skills that we take for granted. So again, we want our children to be able to hold the book the right way. We want them to be able to open and close the book. And if they can't, we need to adapt the book so that they can. They need to be able to turn the pages. We want them to want to engage with the book, to lift flaps, push buttons in the book. We want them that demonstrates engagement and enjoyment of the book. We want our children to point to pictures and to label pictures, to make comments. We want them to make connections between the pictures and then real things in their lives. We want our kids to want to spend more and more time looking at books. We want them to express ideas through writing, and writing has many, many forms. Scribbling, drawing, painting, typing, stamping. There's so many ways, and we're going to talk about that soon. And we want our children to one day be able to create a message a written message that has meaning that they want to share with other people. And all of these skills will help build a foundation that will one day help our kids to perform more advanced skills like repeating things that they've read, answering yes and no questions that they've read, asking for books that they want to read. We want our kids to be able to look at you and then back at the book and then look back at whoever they're with. That's joint engagement. We want our kids to realize that they have ideas and opinions that are worthy of sharing through writing, and that also they can read to be able to learn and appreciate the ideas and opinions of others. We want our children to fill in the blanks so that they are demonstrating that they have enough knowledge about what they're reading, that they can predict what they are about to read, and to fill in the blanks to show that skill. And we want our kids to be able to believe in themselves as authors. We are all authors. If you write an idea, you are an author. And we want our children to feel empowered as if they are, writers, they're authors, and they're producing a message. It's really important at this point to discuss the fact that writing is not handwriting. Handwriting is simply the fine motor skill of forming letters and numbers and shapes. Writing is much bigger. Writing involves being able to express your emotion or your opinion. Writing involves creating a message that then goes to other people. Although handwriting should be practiced because it is an important skill, we have to remember that when we're working on expressive writing, handwriting goes to the side. And if we teach children who have handwriting difficulties, and if we wait for that handwriting to be perfect enough that they can produce a message to express ideas, which would be expressive writing, they may never get there because a lot of our kids have motor challenges that affect their handwriting. So we need to think about what we call alternative pencils. And that term is used to describe other ways to write. Writing has many subskills: spelling, we talked about handwriting, typing, punctuation, grammar usage. Now, like handwriting, all of these subskills are very important, and there is a place for learning these things. But for our beginning readers and writers, we want them to be very willing to participate in activities where they're learning to express their ideas via text. And so we put those subskills on the side, and we focus on getting our kids to learn the function of letters and to learn that they can use those letters to express ideas in their heads. The literacy learning process begins way before we use any of those subskills conventionally. So when babies are young, we read to them. We begin that learning process. Some people even read to babies when they are in the womb, and it is believed that there are benefits to that. But we read to little babies. We're not expecting them to write when they're 8 months old, but we still read to them. This helps lay the foundation because language is being learned. They're learning to listen. They're learning to speak. They're becoming familiar with reading and will soon become familiar with experimenting with writing. And eventually, these skills become conventional, and they're able to be used to write conventionally. So where do we start? Let's talk about reading first. Well, we read, We choose the right books. You have to become an entertainer. You have to make print talk. And you have to use some strategies, and we'll go through each one of these. So the first one, there's nothing more I can say about this. You have to read, read, read. It's really important for our kids to be surrounded by books, even if they are not reading conventionally. It's important that we have books that our children can access. They have to be read to frequently on a daily basis. They can listen as well to books on tape, as well as songs. These are all language learning experiences. Let's talk about choosing the best books for young readers, for toddlers and young beginning readers. You want to choose books that have interesting, clear, main idea type of pictures. Books that are that have pictures that are too busy don't really support the text. So it really helps when the pictures are interesting and clear and really focus on the main idea of the text. It's always fun when books are interactive. It helps motivate our kids. It's important also that the text is predictable in the book. By predictable, I mean something like, brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Red bird, what do you see? So the text is very predictable, and this allows children to chime in because they know what to expect. The text is predictable. That chiming in is really important for reading skills to develop, decoding skills to develop, as well as language skills and listening skills. We also want to choose books that are simple. We want books that have a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. We want books that the child can make a connection to using his or her own background knowledge. And if we choose a book that the child is not familiar with in terms of the theme of the book, like if the child lives in South Florida and the book is about snow, we may want to do some things with the child before we read the book so that they understand what it means if you touch snow. Without building that background knowledge, the child may lack comprehension in the book. So it is always nice to choose books that the child can make a connection to because it's familiar and they're able to use what they already know. But when you can't do that, or when you want to choose a book that the child is a little bit unfamiliar with in terms of its content, then teach it before so you can build that background knowledge. Family photo albums are great beginning books, and that would be called a wordless book. Those are books where you simply are looking at the pictures and engaging while you're looking at the pictures, labeling things, making up your own predictable language. That is Daddy. He is fun. That is Johnny. He is my brother. That is Aunt Sally. She is a painter. You can make up your own predictable text as you talk through the photo album. My favorite book is creating our own books just for your specific child. And this is also a very helpful strategy for creating material for our older children who are beginning readers, and we'll talk about that. Here's some more about choosing good books for our young readers. It's always great to choose books that have rhythm, rhyme, that repetition factor, alliteration. These are important language development skills. Also, you want to choose books that are interesting to the child. Books that have only a few words per page can also be very helpful, especially for our beginning readers. Short books are also very useful for a lot of our kids. Some of our kids have difficulty sitting through a whole book. So choosing that short book can be really, really helpful. And you also want to choose books that are easy to manipulate. Some of our kids do have difficulty manipulating a book. They have trouble turning pages. Well, if a child can't turn a page, the chances of them independently picking up a book for enjoyment and reading it themselves is pretty slim. So we want to add adaptations to a book if a child cannot manipulate it. And that is a topic for another training. But keep in mind that being able to manipulate a book is very, very important. Here are some ideas for creating reading material or finding reading material for older children. It's inappropriate and not as effective to teach older children using, if I might say, babyish material. And so it is more appropriate, age appropriate, to use material that may not necessarily be what other children their age are using, but that is more age appropriate. Using popular songs to teach children, our older children, reading skills is really great because it's so motivating. And a lot of our kids, no matter what their age or how independent they are, they know the songs that they hear on the radio, that they hear in their homes, that their friends are playing, and the motivation to become a reader of those songs is very high. So these are some websites where you can find popular songs. Also poetry. A silly poem read in a really fun way can be very, very motivating to our older readers who are at the beginning level. Magazine articles are often written at a lower literacy level, and that might be appropriate for our beginning older readers. There's also a book published by Mayor Johnson called RAPS, Reading Activities Project for Older Students. And this is what it looks like. There are different books that you copy from this book, and there are symbols to match some of the words, some of the text. There are pictures as well, and along with each book, there are extension activities. Those extension activities are really great because the book just doesn't end when it's done reading. The extension factor is really important to promote generalization. So that is a nice resource. You want to make sure that with those older children that you're using areas of interest to build motivation. Sometimes our older readers have been learning how to read for many, many years. And if they're not motivated to continue to participate in literacy activities, then their learning ends there. So we have to make it really motivating, make it fun, make it motivating. Also, informational books that are written for younger children may be appropriate to use with our older children. Informational books do not use babyish characters or characters that our younger readers like. Informational books are pretty, objective and do have appropriate content for older readers. You can also create your own material. You can adapt existing print material. You can cut out pictures from books or make color copies from books and add your own text, or you can use the text and add your own graphics, or you can just write your own books. Tar Heel Reader is a great, phenomenal resource where you can find a plethora of already made books that have been submitted by professionals, by parents, by students, teachers, on any topic you can possibly imagine. There are different reading levels that are available. You can also download the books and print them. And I cannot give enough accolades to this resource. The benefit of having so many different topics available is that we can meet the needs of our older students. So if, for example, you have a student who, an older student, a teenager, who is very interested in tattoos, well, you might just find, I know you will find, a book about tattoos on Tar Heel Reader. And the topic will be appropriate for the older reader. Reading about tattoos is not appropriate for 5-year-olds, but it is for 15-year-olds. And you'll find ready-made books on Tar Heel Reader that you can use to motivate the older child, the adolescent, and to promote literacy skills. Another great resource is the Start to Finish Literacy Starters by Don Johnston. Great resource that is available for our older readers. Also, you need to become an entertainer when you're reading with your child. We need to make it fun. We need to really be emphatic. You have to be animated and very expressive. You need to exaggerate key words to promote comprehension, to bring attention to important words or ideas. Point to pictures and words if the child is ready, and use lots of props and toys and material that match the book so that you can keep the attention of the child. You have to make print talk. So it's not enough to expose the child to the printed word. You also have to encourage him to notice the print that is around him and to show him the value of what is written. We have to teach our children the function of the written word. We have to teach our kids that when they read something, it has a message for us. And when they write something, they are giving a message to someone else. And we do that by pointing things out around us so that text becomes meaningful to our children. When we write birthday cards with our child, that is showing the function of print and the importance of print. When we write a shopping list and we say to our child, I know you really want those chocolate chip cookies we don't have anymore. Should we write a shopping list and we'll write chocolate chip cookies so when we go to the supermarket, we won't forget what to get. That is showing that print talks. And so we need to take advantage of all those opportunities to really make print functional. When we talk about strategies for reading with our children with autism, for one, it's always great to be face-to-face when reading with our child. Reading, like I said, takes place in a social context. We don't want our child to just read in isolation with our child's back to us. We want our child to look at the book and share the moment with us, to look up at us. If we're sitting behind our child, it's harder. So it's always great for the child to be in front of us so they can look at us. For some books, we also may need to simplify and shorten the text. Sometimes there's too much text in a book that we do want to read with our child. So you don't necessarily have to not read that book. You can change the text. You could even cover the text completely and make it a wordless book. That's okay. But be creative and make the changes that you need to a book so that you can use it to your benefit. You want to make personal connections when reading with children. You want to help them, like we were talking about before, make connections to what they already know so that it's meaningful and that they can incorporate what they already know or what they're learning into what they already know. You can also use visuals to engage the child and to help support their comprehension. And as you can see in these picture examples, we have different visuals that go with books that you can make yourself. Sometimes I will create a symbol for each page or each main idea of a page. and I give it to the child and I ask them to attach it to the page when we get to the right page. It helps keep them on their toes and helps them focus and participate in the reading activity, and it also supports comprehension. So a couple more strategies. You have to follow your child's lead in terms of behavior. Some of our kids have never been able to sit through a book from beginning to end, but we need to teach them. The way I like to teach a child to read a book from beginning to end, with the help and support of a parent or a teacher or a therapist, is to have the book in front of you. You say the title, you open the book to the first page, you say a word from the first page, then you turn to the end of the book, you say a word from the last page, you close the book, and you say, "Yay, we're all finished. Now you can take a break." You bring the child back and you do it again and again and again. And then eventually you want to add a page in the middle. So you're reading the title, labeling something, or reading one word from the first page, reading one word from a middle page, reading one word from the last page. You close the book, they get a break. And you slowly add pages to this routine until the child can sit for longer and longer periods of time. Eventually, the child will be able to sit for the whole book, knowing that when they're done, they can go take their break or they can have some kind of reinforcer. Also, keep in mind that we need to teach our children how to enjoy books. Sometimes our kids do not want to sit with us to read, but we need to teach them how to enjoy a book just like we teach academic skills. To help us do that, you can also use a token system. Even though we are addressing behavioral needs, sometimes during literacy activities, it helps to address the behavior by giving a token to help our child sit for longer and longer periods of time. Sometimes what I will do is have a token board with 10 spots for 10 tokens, and I'll put 9 on. And the child sits with me. I'll say the title, I'll put the token on. I say to the child, "You earn 10 tokens. You can go play with your iPad for a minute." We do that many, many times. Eventually, I only have 8 tokens on the board. And then the child has to earn 2. So I'll say the title, I'll say a word on the first page, and then I give them a token with each time. They have their 10 tokens. I say, "Oh, you got 10 tokens. You can go play." I bring them back, and I keep expanding the number of tokens the child needs to earn. These are some examples of token boards. I like to create token boards that involve a favorite thing of the child or a preference of the child. It's important that it's individualized. When it comes to writing, where do we start? Well, we write. There must be ongoing and effective professional development for our teachers. Very, very important. We need to avoid focusing on the technical skills like the handwriting, grammar, spelling, all those subskills that we talked about. We need to allow for invented spelling, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And we need to consider using assistive technology and what we called alternative pencils. Again, write. Before we said in order to teach literacy skills, we have to read. We also have to write. Nothing replaces those activities. In order for our children to become readers and writers, they have to be readers and writers for a very long time until those skills can develop conventionally. This is a pre-K classroom for 4 and 5-year-old students. And I want to show you their different centers in their classroom. This little guy is in his writing center. And one of the activities in his writing center is simply tracing. He chooses pictures and he traces them. He chooses these templates and he traces them. At 4 years old, that is called writing. That helps lay the foundation. In this pre-K classroom, there's a word wall. Now, are these kids reading these words? Probably not. But it still has to be there. They still must be exposed to the literacy. This is on the wall, just a bunch of different letters and numbers, shapes that they can make. This contributes to reading and writing skills developing. This is from a bulletin board where children's work is displayed. Good friends give hugs, and Cooper wrote that. 4-year-olds need a little support to write, but they have to do it. Could they do it independently? Maybe not, but they still need to experience it. This is a morning message board. The teacher writes a message to her classroom in this pre-K classroom every morning. Can the children come in and read this? No. But some kids may be able to recognize some letters. Some may be able to recognize some words. And it's really important to have it there so that children can experience it. And when the teacher calls the students to circle time, she starts off by reading her morning message. Again, they're not ready to read independently, but we need to expose them to these experiences with the support of the teacher at very young ages so that it can develop conventionally later on. This is their writing center in that classroom. So in these shelves are various activities that the kids can do in their writing center. And you're going to see these activities are not pencil and paper, let's write expressively. This is a classroom for 4 and 5-year-olds, and this is what they're doing. They're writing on chalkboards with chalk. They're tracing. They're coloring in their journals. Some of them may write letters, and some may write some words. They have clipboards and paper. They have scissors, markers, pencils, crayons. They even have a little mailbox in their writing center. They have different letter stencils that they can trace. They have some models of letters there. It's where it says here, learning my letters, so children can have a model if they do want to write letters. And then there's a bunch of cards in a little basket where children can choose cards and simply write the words if they would like. There's a hundreds board in this pre-K classroom, different letter activities, fun things, magnetic counting maze, colors are on the wall, wood pieces from Handwriting Without Tears are available for children to play with. In this particular classroom, they use Handwriting Without Tears, and they use different wooden pieces to create letters. This is a note jar where students could write notes. Are the students at 4 years old able to write notes? Most of them no. But even if they scribble, that is considered appropriate writing at the age of 4 and 5. So the point is, before we go on to invented spelling, is that children need to be exposed to age-appropriate writing activities, even if they're not conventional writers. All of those activities that I just showed you in a typical pre-K classroom must be available to our children with language challenges, to our children with autism, to our children with other challenges. These types of activities are in typical general education classrooms and in our homes for all children. and our children with challenges must be exposed to the same activities. And it's even more important for them to be exposed to those activities because they need the extra practice. Another writing strategy is to allow our children to use what we call invented spelling. This is a note that my neighbor's daughter put in my mailbox many, many years ago. She must have been about 6, and she wrote, "Dear neighbor, happy early Thanksgiving." Now, as you can see, the spelling is not correct, but for a 6-year-old, it is perfect. She listened to the sounds of the words, and she used the letters that represented those sounds. And this is something we need to allow our children to experiment with in order for them to become conventional spellers. We cannot expect them to right off the bat become perfect spellers, because that does not teach them the skills that they need in order to develop that process of spelling. This is another one that my own son wrote to me. "Dear Mom, you are so mean for taking the peace sign, Benji." So Benji was very angry with me because I took a sign away from him, and he wrote this note to me. This was perfectly appropriate for the age he was at the time. And this is called invented spelling. We must allow our children to have experience doing that. Let's talk about this alternative pencil concept. Each student must have a pencil. It doesn't matter what that pencil is. It might be something really alternative, but that's okay. They have to have a way to write. And these are different ideas. Alternative pencils can include painting, finger painting, using stamps, stickers, dictating into a tape recorder or a smartphone, using markers, using magnetic letters, using numbers and letters that have Velcro on the back of them, dictating to another person, using a keyboard, using a touchscreen keyboard, voice recognition software, word prediction software, and eye gaze technology. All of these ideas are alternative pencils. By using these things, children can still have a mode of communication in text. So it doesn't matter if a child is writing a word with a pencil or using stamps. The message can still be expressed, and that's the most important thing. So I encourage you to think outside the box, to think about how you can get your child or your student to express. And sometimes we realize that by requiring our child to use an actual pencil to write, we're holding them back, because the act of writing, the handwriting part, is very difficult for a lot of our kids. So let's give them another way to perform the skill. When we look at choosing alternative pencils, you have to make sure that that alternative pencil is easy and that it offers the greatest potential to develop the skills that we want the child to develop. We also want to make sure that we provide access to the whole alphabet when we talk about choosing alternative pencils. So when we're using stamps as an alternative pencil, you want to make sure that you have every single letter available to the child all at once, not just 3 letters, because we don't experiment with writing knowing just 3 letters. We need to give our kids the whole thing. And we also want to give our children alternative pencils as soon as possible. We don't even want to wait until they know their letters, because we know that writing, expressive writing, begins to develop way before they even know how to use letters. before they know how to make letters into words and words into sentences. Children need to have access to alternative pencils right away. Let's talk about creating your own books. This is one of my favorite parts of literacy teaching. So this is a book that I made for a young adolescent who really hadn't had a lot of experience reading books. And so he wasn't really motivated. So we had to kind of think about what would motivate him. This young man liked to eat. He loved all different kinds of foods, and he also had a great sense of humor. So we put a picture of him on every single page because he also likes to look at himself. We all like to see ourselves in books. And we made a wordless book using the photo of himself on every page and his favorite foods. And we also tried to make it a little bit silly. So you'll see some of the photos that we chose are kind of humorous. These kind of pictures that we chose, we took them off of Google, really motivated him. And this is how we ended the book. So this young man really got a kick out of this book and was totally willing to go through the book with us from beginning to end. When we made the next book, we added more text. And every book that we made for him became a little more challenging, a little more difficult, until one day we got to the point where he brought novels to his mom, actual novels, and asked her to read to him. And this is what we want to see. But we have to start where the child is interested. And in this case, we chose the topic and we chose the graphics that were really motivating to the young man, the adolescent. This is an app that you can use to make your own book. It's called Kid in Storybook Maker. And in this app, you can put your own text, you can record your own voice, and you can also put your own photos. And so, again, children love to see themselves in books. It's very motivating for them to see themselves. And that's a really nice feature of this book, that you can add your own photos into their graphics. This is another app called We Publish, and you create your own book using your own text and your own graphics, and then you print the it's like a full page that you then can fold and make into your own book. You publish it. This is another app called Story Maker, where you can choose your own graphics, and you can add your own voice, and you add your text. Again, you can personalize the books. You have to choose apps, you have to choose topics and graphics, all based on the preference of your particular child or student. This is another one where you can create pictureless books, kind of like a video. And so you choose different graphics and you record yourself moving the graphics through the screen, and you add your own audio as you're doing it. And so you create your own little video book. Again, very motivating. Is this a conventional book? Absolutely not. But this involves a lot of language and a lot of engagement. And that is all very important for literacy development. In the age of digital everything, we need to talk a little bit about digital storybooks, because we all have smartphones and tablets and iPads, and digital books are everywhere at our fingertips. Some of these books may be interactive. Some digital storybooks have embedded music, embedded sound effects, and games and video clips. So when you get to a certain page, if you click on an animal, you'll get sound effects. Or if you click on the tree, it takes you into another screen to a game. Some of these storybooks can be very motivating to our kids, but they can also be a little bit distracting, because by being interrupted from one page being taken into a game, the fluency of the storybook is cut, and that can greatly affect comprehension. So you want to be very thoughtful about the books you choose and its function for your particular child. I encourage you to consider exposing your child to both digital and print, because I do believe that there are benefits to both. The research shows that enhanced digital books promote discussion specifically related to the digital features rather than the actual content of the book, which is okay sometimes. But we also really do want to teach our kids to focus on the content of the book, because that's what really builds the comprehension of language. So choose ebooks if the motivational factor, the fun factor, is a priority. Sometimes for our kids, there is a time and place for that motivational factor to be the most important thing. If you want to build literacy experiences, then choose a print book. Both can be very important. Also, keep in mind that research has shown that story recall is not as strong in digital books. So when discussing the details of an ebook after reading the book, recalling those details was not as strong as it was in actual print books. And that is because of the distraction factor of digital books. If you go to these websites, you can find some really good digital book reviews. So I encourage you to check that out. So the bottom line is, reading and writing experiences provide meaningful opportunities to practice language, literacy, and joint engagement skills in very authentic ways. And our kids need to be exposed to those experiences 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more than the typical child. There is nothing that says our children with challenges cannot achieve these skills, but we need to provide them with way more experience practicing these skills, and we need to provide them with alternative pencils, and we need to think outside the box and give them different ways to learn how to read and to write, and we need to be creative. So the takeaway for today is that listening, speaking, reading, and writing practice must be developed simultaneously. They will not develop separately. We need to read, read, read. We need to write, write, write. We need to choose the right books, the right ebooks, and meaningful writing activities. And we need to implement specific strategies to support our child of any age with autism spectrum disorder to optimize literacy language learning opportunities. Thank you so much. I hope that you learn some helpful concepts and strategies. And if I can be of any assistance, if I can answer any questions, please contact me